A perfect man through gene editing, a customized human beginning with gene-modified embryos. This is already underway in China. A whistleblower exposed the details. A list of nearly 2 million Chinese Communist Party members was leaked. They were working for major Western companies and even diplomatic institutions as of 2016. Are Chinese vaccine candidates reliable? A CCP virus vaccine developer has a history of bribery. At least 20 officials and hospital administrators have accepted its corruption. A Chinese scholar revealed the CCP has many old friends on Wall Street. We look into who they are. And an expert says there is more behind Beijing's sanctions on Australian goods. It's not only retaliation against Australia's tough stance toward the communist regime. Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. First, we look to a controversial medical study in China, gene editing techniques. He Jiankui, an associate professor at China's Southern University of Science and Technology, was arrested for editing the genes of twin baby girls 2 years ago. But the scandal is only a piece of the Chinese regime's plans for this type of science, with an end goal being able to genetically modify humans on a large scale. Earlier this month, an insider released a report on Chinese social media platform Weibo. It featured the contents of a speech by a Chinese genome sequencing company CEO. The remarks discuss gene editing and the potential for creating so-called customized humans. Insider Wang Deming identified himself as director of Jiangsu's Operations Center, part of the National Gene Bank Cell Center. He posted a number of photos from Wang Jian's speech back in 2018. Wang Jian is the chairman of Beijing's Genomics Institute, also known as BGI Group. A photo of the presentation shows titles for different parts of the speech, detailing what BGI Group is working on. Among the titles are phrases like gene editing and embryo modification, as well as one questioning whether it's possible to change fate. Also on screen during the presentation, the text explains BGI Group is also working with scientists from other countries, and together they've edited the genes of 58 embryos. One photo depicted the concept of embryo gene editing from the speaker's point of view. The Chinese characters featured on the picture reveal the goal of the practice, genetically engineering a perfect human. The speaker also touched on the concept of human cloning. As for when the technology may be available, he said man-made life is in sight. As the report's insider pointed out, the speaker also mentioned plans to, quote, customize humans and artificially synthesize life. He similarly claimed they would combine eggs from a female celebrity with sperm from a certain mayor, as well as collect the genetic material of national leaders to be used as data in their research. The insider turned whistleblower labeled the claims as having no ethics and no conscience. According to Chinese media reports, the Nanjing municipal government signed an agreement with BGI Group on May 20th, 2018. The city's Communist Party secretary and Wang Jian, the speaker mentioned above, attended the event and signed the agreement. BGI Group denied the allegations of gene editing practices, claiming the Jiangsu Gene Bank Operations Center does not exist, and accusing the whistleblower of releasing fake information. BGI did admit they edited human embryos, but claimed no gene editing babies were born. The whistleblower's posts were once popular on Chinese social media, but they have since been deleted. On the other hand, BGI's statement is widely available online. The Chinese Communist Party's media mouthpiece, CCTV, even circulated the statement. But a number of Chinese netizens are questioning the statement. They say they follow a rule to help determine what rumors are true. The more authorities refute the rumors, the more truthful they are. A data leak reveals Chinese Communist Party members are working for top U.S. companies and sensitive industries. Experts are raising concerns. NTD's Juliet Song has the details.
A major data leak reveals Chinese Communist Party members have worked in sensitive industries around the world, from America's top defense firm to the British consulate. A person that reviewed the data before it went public said it demonstrates the Chinese regime has extended its reach globally.
It tells us that members of the Chinese Communist Party are working at our big companies. They are working in our universities. And perhaps most concerningly of all, they're working for our governments, in our embassies, where they have access to information of potentially enormous national security ramifications.
The database includes personal information from almost 2 million Chinese Communist Party members, most of them from Shanghai. It includes details like ID, birthday, and position in the Communist Party. The dataset came from 2016. It shows party members often work in sensitive industries. Take the US, for example. Pfizer, one of the world's largest pharmaceutical companies in the world, employed almost 70 of them. Pfizer rolled out America's first CCP virus vaccine this week. Another example is Qualcomm, the American semiconductor or microchip giant. Qualcomm employed over 200 CCP members in its staff. And top U.S. defense contractor Boeing had almost 300 CCP members working for it across China in 2016. And it's not just the U.S. Those on the list also worked or are working in Europe and Australia, in fields from banking to military technology research. A Chinese dissident leaked the dataset to IPAC, a coalition of lawmakers. IPAC spokesperson Sam Armstrong says 2 problems arise when Western companies in sensitive areas take on CCP members.
You make an oath when you join the Chinese Communist Party, and it's an oath for life to put it above all. And there are many of us, myself included, that don't believe you can serve 2 masters. From a security perspective, you can be a member of the Chinese Communist Party, or you can come and work for Western companies or governments. You can't do both.
Another problem is a moral one. Armstrong added party members are signed on to everything the Communist Party does.
Whether that's forcibly harvesting organs from the falun gong, whether that's imprisoning over 1 million Uyghurs, whether that's engaging in abhorrent abuses of human rights in Tibet, in Inner Mongolia, and now in Hong Kong. Those are your beliefs. You have signed up to them. And many in the West will find it bluntly unconscionable that an individual like that is signed up to such abhorrent practices that remind us of the worst elements of the 20th century could work for Western companies or Western governments that we know and respect.
He said what's concerning is that companies know the risk that comes with employing CCP members. In China, companies with more than 3 party members are required to set up party cells or known groups of party members. 70% of foreign companies have also set up similar units as of 2017.
It's not that companies are unaware, it's that companies are prepared to make these moral sacrifices in order to access capital and fund and profits in China.
An expert told the Epoch Times about another concern.
There is a list that can be manipulated by the party back home to call in favors and to call in obligation.
He also outlines his main question.
What does the Chinese Communist Party want with such a list? Why is it tracking these people and for what reason?
So far, it's unclear if those on the list have spied for the Chinese Communist Party. But Professor Siracusa said the important question is, why are they on the list in the first place? Reporting by Juliet Song, NTD News.
Now we turn to the vaccine candidates from China. One of them comes from Sinovac Biotech, a biotech and pharmaceutical company. The company is known to have a history of bribing Chinese authorities. And now the person who reportedly handled the bribery is responsible for overseeing the company's CCP, or Chinese Communist Party, virus vaccine development. Yin Weidong, the founder and CEO of Sinovac Biotech, admitted in court in 2016 he had paid over $80,000 in bribes to an official from China's Food and Drug Administration. In return, that official accelerated the approval of Sinovac vaccines for 5 different diseases: hepatitis A, influenza A, SARS, bird flu, and hand, foot, and mouth disease. That official was later sentenced to 10 years in prison. He was charged with accepting bribes from 7 companies, including Sinovac. But he narrowly avoided prosecution in exchange for cooperating with the prosecutor. When he testified, he claimed he couldn't refuse the official's request for bribes. Despite the charges, Yin kept the position of CEO and is now responsible for research and development of a CCP virus vaccine. A U.S.-based Chinese affairs commentator shed light on the reason why.
Under the CCP's rule, collusion between government officials and business owners is common, as well as bribery. This will not change because of the pandemic. It has formed a terrible dark culture. It's not an individual case. Once involved in the swamp of power seeking, they'll be unable to dig themselves out. So that's why neither vaccines nor testing kits have been spared from the situation.
Chinese media reports show between 2008 and 2016, at least 20 officials and hospital administrators in 5 Chinese provinces admitted to accepting bribes from Sinovac Biotech. Recently, the CCP virus broke out again in different cities and provinces in China. Many neighborhoods in the southwestern Chinese city of Chengdu are under lockdown. Residents are not allowed to go out even for food. Some residents began to sing loudly at night to cheer each other up. Just like in Wuhan, the epicenter of the original virus outbreak earlier this year. A netizen posted a video showing a woman who on Saturday wanted to go out to work to make a living, but she was caught and restrained when she climbed over the wall. The residents cannot go out even to buy food. The only food they can get is by delivery. But many of them are migrant workers and have no money to pay for food deliveries. Netizens say the residents in the closed communities feel helpless. Some netizens pointed out this was exactly the case at the beginning of the lockdown in Wuhan earlier this year. Many residents were quarantined at home, singing at night to cheer up themselves and their neighbors. There were people who died at home, but no media reported on them. On the Twitter post, it said that videos showing singing in the evening have been banned since Saturday. Videos of this kind will now be deleted as soon as they are uploaded. Over 900 lawmakers worldwide issued a joint statement last week to condemn the Chinese regime's persecution of Falun Gong. Current and former ministers, senators, and members of parliament from 35 countries and regions in Europe, North America, South America, the Middle East, and Asia Pacific are among the senators. They expressed their deep concern for Falun Gong's over 20-year-long struggle for freedom of belief, describing the persecution of Falun Gong in China as one of the harshest campaigns against a faith group in modern times. They urged the Chinese Communist regime to immediately stop the persecution and to unconditionally release all detained Falun Gong practitioners and other prisoners of conscience. Falun Gong was introduced in China in the 1990s, known for its meditative exercises and moral teachings of 3 principles: truthfulness, compassion, and tolerance. In 1999, the Chinese Communist Party started to persecute Falun Gong due to its fast-growing popularity. State estimates at the time showed Falun Gong had about 70 million to 100 million adherents, even more than the members of the party. According to the U.S.-based Falun Dafa Information Center, millions of followers have since been thrown into prisons, labor camps, psychiatric wards, and other facilities. Hundreds of thousands have suffered torture. President Trump says China is the biggest winner of the U.S. National Defense Bill. He says he'll veto it.
On Sunday, President Trump tweeted, "The biggest winner of our new defense bill is China. I will veto." The Senate passed the National Defense Authorization Act, or NDAA, on Friday in an 84-13 vote. The House passed it earlier by 335-78 vote. Last week, before the votes, Trump tweeted, "I hope House Republicans will vote against the very weak National Defense Authorization Act, which I will veto. Must include a termination of Section 230 for national security purposes, preserve our national monuments, and allow for 5G and troop reductions in foreign lands." For months, the president has railed against Section 230. The federal law gives blanket liability protections for social media and tech companies. Trump and Republicans have said the bill allows companies to choose what content is allowed, adding that companies unfairly target conservatives. The NDAA bill also doesn't support Trump's efforts to reduce U.S. troops in Afghanistan and Germany. Senator Rand Paul voted against the measure. He says he doesn't support a bill that limits Trump's ability to bring troops home. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell tweeted, "This annual bill will unlock the training, tools, and cutting-edge equipment that our service members and civilian employees need." The bill got over 2/3 support in Congress. That means if President Trump does veto the bill, Congress can vote override it.
Recently, the vice dean of the School of International Relations at a renowned Chinese university gave a speech on November 28th in Shanghai. Dongsheng's speech was titled, "Will China's opening up of its financial sector attract the wolf of Wall Street?" The speech garnered over 1 million views online. Di mentioned an open secret in his speech. He said that many of the establishment and the Wall Street elites are the CCP's old friends. He did not mention their names specifically, but one of the most significant examples is definitely the investment bank JP Morgan, with its Sons and Daughters program. Between 2006 and 2013, JP Morgan hired about 100 interns and full-time employees. Most of them were sons and daughters of Chinese high-level officials. From the perspective of professionalism, they were unqualified, but it was an important part of the bank's efforts to build relationships in China and win lucrative business. U.S. authorities described the program as corruption, plain and simple, and corruptly influencing government officials. In 2016, JP Morgan got a $264 million fine. A South China Morning Post article says JP Morgan's sons and daughters fine won't stop Wall Street's unethical hiring practices, but, quote, the cost of doing business in China just went up. The Chinese Communist Party's efforts to work on Wall Street have not stopped. In the past 3 years, the CCP's vice chair Wang Qishan met 3 times with his old friend from Wall Street. Wang is in charge of finance and trade and was seen as the person taking care of U.S.-China relations. Wang's deep Wall Street network has been developed through years of nurturing. In May 2018, Wang met with a delegation of U.S. business leaders and former top political officials in Beijing. The members included former U.S. Treasury Secretary Henry Paulson and former president of Goldman Sachs, John Thornton. Goldman Sachs entered China in the 90s and gained the CCP's trust by actively connecting the CCP higher officials. The CCP treats Goldman Sachs like nobody else. It was the first to obtain the Qualified Foreign Institutional Investor Certificate and will be the first certified foreign-owned brokerage firm in China. Also in 2018, in September, Wang invited the heads of major U.S. financial institutions to Beijing for a China-U.S. financial roundtable, and he wanted their help to exert influence on the Trump administration. But it did not work. The parties invited reportedly include the Blackstone Group, Citigroup, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan Chase, and Morgan Stanley. This October, the CCP held the second Bund Financial Summit in Shanghai. Wang once again met up with his old friends from Wall Street. Every one of these Wall Street elites have been active in connecting the CCP and extracted lucrative profits from them over the past decades of the Chinese market developments. If China wants to attack the U.S., it has to go through Australia first. According to a well-known Chinese affairs commentator, this is one reason why China has been aggressive towards the country recently. Now to NTD's Don Ma for the details.
China wants Australia to side with it in the event of a military confrontation with the United States. That's according to a Chinese affairs commentator. He told us it's one reason for China's recent economic aggression towards Australia. China recently slapped trade sanctions on numerous Australian goods. This includes Australian lobster, barley, coal, wine, and beef, among others. Some tariffs are as high as 200%. Commentator Cheng Xiaonong is a former researcher from the Office of the Standing Committee of China's National People's Congress. He says Australia controls strategic passageways between the South China Sea and the U.S. that China would want to use during a possible confrontation with the U.S. Cheng says if Australia strengthens defense measures in those passageways, China will no longer be able to threaten the U.S. with military confrontation. He says China doesn't currently have the ability to wage a direct war with the U.S. Because of that, China can only threaten the U.S. with long-range intercontinental missiles carried by nuclear submarines. But the submarines are stationed in the South China Sea, so Beijing needs a passageway to transport them out and into the range of the U.S. He says there are 3 passageways for the submarines to get in range. First, the northern passage of the Baishi Channel between Taiwan and the Philippines. Second, the eastern passage of the Celeb Sea between the Philippines and Indonesia. And the third, the southern passage of the Coral Sea between Papua New Guinea and Australia. The first passage is currently monitored by the U.S.
So it's also trying to find another way. Regardless if China goes east or south, it involves Australia. The 2 waterways will end up either in north or south of Papua New Guinea. Regardless, China will end up in Australia's defense zone.
Being in Australia's defense zone hinders China's plan. This is because Australia is in the midst of upgrading its defense sector. In June, Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison poured around $270 billion into defense spending. He says the move is aimed at countering China's rise.
Australia's new defense strategy includes enhancing underwater monitoring apparatuses. What this means is they want ways to monitor the CCP's nuclear submarines, and this annoys the CCP very much. If the Australian plan is gradually implemented, it will bankrupt the CCP's attempt to put military pressure on the United States.
Chung says China's aggression towards Australia is an effort to pressure it not to interfere with the regime's plans. Other possible reasons include retaliation towards the country's recent hardline stance towards China. Last week, the Australian Parliament passed a law that allows it to stop China's Australian Belt and Road Initiative. That refers to a controversial infrastructure project. It's been criticized for trapping countries under debt and expanding China's overseas influence. Earlier this year, it also called for an investigation into the origins of the CCP virus. Australia also banned Chinese telecommunication equipment giant Huawei from participating in its 5G network. Australia's toughening stance dates back to 2018. That's when Australia passed a law that impeded the CCP's infiltration. Chung points out that if Australia is subdued by the Chinese Communist Party, more and more countries in Southeast Asia will succumb to it as well. But Australia appears ready to defend its national security. The United States is also showing support for Australia. This is Don Ma reporting, NTD News.
And that's all for today's China in Focus. Thanks for watching and see you tomorrow.